Hello everyone, Bashar here. So we are together with another nerdy video in which we'll do a little bit of calculation. So I want to talk to you guys about cooldown reduction versus increased cooldown recovery rate. So thing is, as far as I know, in Path of Exile 2 we do not actually have percentage-based cooldown reduction. We have the increased cooldown recovery rate, and while they do sound quite similar, they are not the same thing, right? And as you can imagine, we have the worst version. Increased cooldown recovery rate is weaker compared to percentage-based cooldown reduction. So we have a cooldown reduction item, but it's not percentage-based, it's temporalis, right? Extremely rare and expensive. What it does is it reduces your cooldowns by a flat amount. So let's say, for example, I have the Infernal Cry here. Its cooldown is, it actually will be calculated differently. That's not a good example. Let's say I have a 10-second cooldown and I have a temporalis that reduces the cooldowns by 2 seconds. It's going to be 8 seconds, right? In here, it's going to be different, right? They are applied a little bit differently. I will get to it at the end. And so, what does a percentage-based cooldown reduction do? It reduces your cooldowns by the stated amount, by the stated percentage. And as I said, if you have a 20% cooldown reduction and if you have a 10-second cooldown, that will become 8 seconds. If you have 1 minute cooldown, it will become, did I say 10%? Did I say 20% or 10%? Okay, let me rewind it. You have a 10-second cooldown, right? An ability with a cooldown of 10 seconds, right? And you have 20% cooldown reduction, and that will be 8 seconds when the cooldown reduction is applied, right? If you have a 1 minute cooldown, right, that will be 48 seconds when the cooldown reduction is applied, because 60 seconds, the 20% of that is 12 seconds, so 16 minus 12 is 48 seconds, right? And so I don't want to waste more time with cooldown reduction percentage because we just don't have it in this game. As I said, I have never seen it, but we do have increased cooldown recovery rate. So what is the difference, guys? Cooldown reduction, I have told you how it applies. It reduces the cooldown by the stated amount. Right? So how does increased cooldown recovery rate work, right? So for example, I have it from shield charges quality, right? And I have it from ingenuity. And to make the perfect example, I also have second wind in. It also makes the increased cooldown recovery rate less, right? So it penalizes our cooldown recovery rate. So why am I doing this video, right? That's also important. Why am I doing this video? Because sometimes, guys, a certain cooldown for a skill has to be achieved, and it always won't be, maybe 100,000 gold in which you spec some skills, right? Maybe you'll be getting some items. So for example, you could go for a Crest of Ardura with a 50% increased cooldown recovery rate, right? And that costs a little, right? Or you could be getting something even more expensive, right? So instead of, trying and maybe failing to get the cooldown that you require, right? I am trying to show you the free method in which you can calculate it for yourself, right? So how does it work? But keep in mind, it's very important that you know all sources of increased cooldown recovery rate, or it will throw your calculation off. So for example, in this calculation, if I do it like this, right, it's going to be wrong. Why? Because I have 10% from my passive node as well, right? You have to know all of those. So what's the difference between, again, let me whip out the calculator. What's the difference between cooldown, increased cooldown reduction percentage, and cooldown reduction percentage and increased cooldown recovery rate, right? So for example, guys, if I have a 10% cooldown reduction and a 20% cooldown reduction, so I need to, go back to increased cooldown reduction in order to demonstrate the difference. So guys, I have a 100-second cooldown for sake of argument, right? I have a 20% cooldown reduction, right? And then I have another 10% cooldown reduction. So guys, with a 10 and 20% cooldown reduction, my cooldown will be 72 seconds instead of 70, right? they are going to get applied multiplicatively. So how does it go with the increased cooldown recovery rate? So for example, guys, let's just go for ingenuity and shield charges quality. So these are doing the same thing, so they are going to be additive, right? I'm going to add these numbers up. So 10% from here and 30% from here. So my cooldown recovery will be increased at a rate of 40%. So, and shield charges basic cooldown is 3 seconds. So 3 seconds, 3 seconds divided by, I'll have to do a parentheses here, 1 plus 0.4, right? Why? Because 1 is the basic rate that I recover my cooldown at, and I have 40% bonus for the sake of argument here, ingenuity 30% and 10% from quality. So, and let's close that bracket, and my cooldown will be 2.14 seconds, right? And well, let me see if I can demonstrate if I did it right. So as I said, I have 10% from my 3. So if I did it correctly, shield charge. Okay. So guys, if I did it correctly, it should display 2.14 seconds now. Aha! See? I got it right. Okay, let me put in the original one. And first off, I have to show you my credentials, so I'm getting it right? Because if I'm getting it wrong, what use is there for further explanations? So, how does it work? So guys, I have 10% from quality, 30% from ingenuity, 10% from my 3, right? So these are doing the same thing, so they will be added up. So I have a 50% bonus to my increased cooldown recovery rate, right? And then I have a 50% penalty, right, which will be applied separately. So sadly, it doesn't go like this. 30 plus 10 adds up to 50, minus 50, you will be recovering your cooldown at the same rate. Nope, sadly, that's not how it works. This is Path of Exile. It always chooses the course that is bad for us. It is applied separately. And if you observe here, my cooldown will actually be 4 seconds instead of 3. See? So the way it's going to get calculated is 3 seconds is shield charges base cooldown recovery rate divided by, open the parentheses, 1 plus 0.3, that is ingenuity, plus 0.1, that's quality, and that 0.1 is the one I get from my passive tree, right? And so that's the cooldown rate, and let me prove it to you. So if I take the second wind off, oops, I did do something wrong. We are on 2 seconds. If I did this right, if I remove this second wind, now the cooldown should be 4 seconds. 2 seconds. There you are, 2 seconds. And I put it back on, and it's back to 4 seconds. So how does that calculate, guys? So we calculated the bonuses, right? And we reduced the shield charges cooldown down to 3 seconds, from 3 seconds down to 2 seconds. And now we apply the 50% penalty, right? Which makes our cooldown twice as hard to recover, and from 2 seconds it gets boosted to 4 seconds, and that is calculated by, we had 2 divided by 1 over 2, right? Yep, that's how it gets calculated. And so the thing is, guys, I didn't explain this in my additive versus multiplicative video actually, but I thought it was a little simple, but let me just go over it now. So guys, you could say, but you did the bonus first. What if we do the penalty first? Well, the thing is, guys, multiplication and division isn't. Multiplication is commutative, right? That means the order of you doing things doesn't really matter. So I could first apply the cooldown penalty to shield charge. That would bring it up to 6 seconds from 3 seconds, and then we would recover it 50% faster. 6 divided by 1.5 is 4 seconds, right? So it's not going to change things. Same thing goes for calculating stuff when you have multiplicative stuff. I mean, you can't do them in any order, right? Because the end result will not change, because what happens if you do 10% first, 20% second, 30% last, or in the reverse order, or any order you choose, right? Because they are going to get multiplied, all of them will be multiplied. The order that you do things in does not matter at all. So guys, that's how cooldown reduction is calculated. So this was, for example, pretty important in season 0. Why? Because for the auto bomber, for example, you needed your blink cooldown to be as short as possible, and precise calculation of blink was important because, guys, in temporalis, right, when you are buying a temporalis, the variance makes an extreme difference, right? I mean, if you have a 3-second temporalis versus a 3.5-second temporalis, that will be like you paying like 50 divine extra, right? So it is important to get what you need. That was actually a little bit more simple. So guys, let me do this final interaction with you. Temporalis were and increased cooldown reduction recovery. So first of all, guys, I kept saying temporalis, but not everyone has to know what temporalis does. Let me just show it to you quickly. So temporalis is the only item in the game, as far as I know, that applies a flat cooldown reduction, right? It's not percentage, it just reduces the cooldowns, right? You should be able to see now. Yes. So guys, what temporalis does is it reduces all of your cooldowns from 1 to 2 seconds, right? Ranging from 1 to 2 seconds. And of course, it's such a rare item. As you can see, 1000 divine is the cheapest one. You do a few divines on it to get the good versions on it. So guys, so what happens if you have a perfect temporalis with 2 seconds cooldown reduction, and you have additional cooldown recovery? So for example, guys, let's go over shield charge again. So shield charge's cooldown is 3 seconds, right? And temporalis gets applied first, right? So the 3 second cooldown will be reduced by 2 seconds, right? Then we will have a 1 second cooldown. Then it will be shortened by 50%. That would bring it down to 0.6 seconds repeating, and then the second wind will double it, basically bringing our cooldown to 1.33 seconds. Yeah, that's what it does. That would be the end result. And keep in mind, guys, if you ever get the temporalis, if you are that lucky, keep in mind temporalis has a special rule. If temporalis were to bring the skill's cooldown below 0.1 seconds, then it doesn't. Right? 0.1 second is temporalis's cap. So for example, guys, you have a 2 second cooldown, right? And you have a 2 second perfect temporalis, the cooldown will still be 0.1 second, and then all of these cooldown reduction shenanigans will get applied. Okay? So that's how those two interact. I mean, as I said, I don't think there are any other items like temporalis out there. I haven't seen them. Maybe there are, but that's the way they get applied, right? The flat cooldown reduction gets applied first, then you find the modified cooldown reduction, then you apply the increased cooldown, decreased cooldown recovery rate percentages, right? Separately, you do the increase first, then the decrease, or you do the decrease first, then the increase, whatever it is that you like, and you will be able to find the final amount. Yeah. It is a bit too nerdy, I know, but as I said, guys, sometimes it can make a difference, right? For example, if you find yourself trying to buy a temporalis, right, this could make a difference, and there could be other spots that it could make a difference. So that's it. Now it's out there, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.